If you want to be rich, then you have to be willing to do what most people aren't willing to do. For many people, the problem isn't how much money we earn, it's all the little traps that we keep falling for. So whether you earn 60K or 200K a year, here are 5 things that you should avoid doing if you actually want to build wealth. This first one's gonna sound very controversial, so before you cancel me, just let me explain. All right, so the first thing you need to avoid doing is to stop identifying as poor. Most of us learned about money from our parents. So if your parents were poor, then most likely they didn't have a wealth-focused mindset, and their habits, their beliefs, and their views ultimately became yours. And I'm not talking about intelligence here. I didn't grow up with money, and I like to think, at least according to my mom, I'm decently smart. But what I'm talking about here is how we think about money. For example, growing up, whenever I wanted to buy something at like Toys R Us or get fast food, my mom would always say, sorry, we can't afford it. And I love my mom, but whenever someone starts with the words, we can't, it becomes a sort of excuse to just shut your brain down. Like there is no point in even thinking about it or talking about that thing anymore because you said it yourself, there is no alternative path. Aristotle once said, give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man, which refers to how important early childhood influences are to the rest of our lives. That's why NFL athletes, people who make tens of millions of dollars throughout their career, 78% of them who retire will file for bankruptcy in 2 years. So if you're like me and you didn't grow up with money, what can you do? Well, the good news is, just like a computer, you can reprogram your mindset. One of the easiest ways is to just rewire how you think or how you speak, right? So instead of thinking or saying we can't, people with a wealth mindset instead they'll ask, how can? How can we afford it? Or how can we achieve that? And it's a very subtle difference, but by asking the question, it kind of forces your brain to open up and search for a way forward. The next thing you want to avoid if you want to be rich is staying in a small pot. All right, so just like this plant, when this plant was a seed, the size of this pot was great for it. But as the plant continued to grow, the roots eventually hit the edge of this pot, which ultimately caused it to stop growing. If this is you, then you're not alone. But the question is, what can you do about it? Well, basically, you need to move to a bigger pot. Only then can you, just like the plants in the background, can they continue to grow and thrive. And I know that it can be challenging to do because our brains are inherently do not like to take risk, but it's something that genuinely changed the trajectory of my life. I don't know if you can tell, but when I was younger, I was really shy and introverted. And there was even this one time where I straight up told my teacher that it's okay if you dock points off my grade if I didn't have to give a presentation in front of the class, because that felt like torture to me. But when I became a senior in high school, I finally decided to put on my big boy pants and step outside of my small pot. I checked out a couple of Toastmaster events and even volunteered to do like a public speaking shenanigan. And obviously I was complete trash at it at first, but just like lifting weights, right? The more you do it and the more you practice, the stronger you get. And just last year, I was one of the keynote speakers at FinCon, which is the largest finance conference, as well as the Asian Creative Festival in New York City. But I would have never had these opportunities or even started a YouTube channel if I didn't force myself outside of a smaller pot. You have to remember that your brain's main goal is to keep you alive. So if it ever senses an opportunity that can, change your life, but it comes with a lot of risk, like you failing or being outcasted by your community, then its survival instinct is gonna kick in and your brain is gonna be like, nope. The point is, your brain just wants you to survive, but sometimes just surviving is not what's best for you. The next thing to avoid if you want to be rich is to stop playing the guessing game. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they fall victim to the get-rich-quick schemes where they constantly try to chase shortcuts to build wealth instead of following proven strategies. One of the biggest examples, gambling and lottery tickets. 62% of Americans said they gambled over $1,000 on average in the last 12 months alone. And I get the appeal, right? A chance at getting rich, but the odds of winning is less than finding a parking spot at Costco on a Sunday. One analysis even found that if you spent $1 million on $2 lottery tickets, you have a 99.5% chance of not hitting the jackpot. And sadly, gambling is getting more and more popular. Even I've received countless sponsorship requests from these gambling companies offering a boatload of money, but I always reject them because it's not something I support. If you actually want to build long-term consistent wealth, instead of burning your money with lottery tickets and gambling, you should invest. For example, let's say John and David, right? They each have $100 extra every single month. John decides to invest his $100 every month in a low-cost index fund that averages around 10% return per year. David, on the other hand, decides to spend his $100 every single month on lottery tickets. Fast forward 10 years, they've both put in about $12,000 in total, but here's where it gets really interesting. John's investment grows over time. His $12K in total contributions grow to over $20,000, which is pretty solid. But David, on the other hand, let's just be a little generous here. All right, let's just say he played the state lottery, which has about a 60% payout rate, meaning for every dollar that he spends, statistically speaking, he would get about 60 cents back. Meaning in 10 years, David's 12K that he spent on lottery ticket purchases returns roughly 7.2K and a pile of losing tickets that he can use to make fire when it gets cold outside. So if you're serious about building wealth, you need to start investing. And if you ever thought investing was too complicated or expensive to get into, well, thanks to today's sponsor, First Trade, it's never been easier or more accessible. With over 40 years of experience and recognition for ease of use, First Trade lets you trade stocks, ETFs, options, and mutual funds with $0 in commission. Plus, you'll get free educational resources and AI-powered real-time market research so you can invest smarter without wasting hours digging through the news. And from now until September 30th, if you sign up with a new account with my link down below, First Trade is offering a 1% cash match when you transfer assets from another broker. Meaning if you transfer 10K, First Trade will reward you with $100. If you transfer 20K, you'll get $200. The more you transfer, the more money you get. So if you're like me and you love a great deal, I'll leave a link to First Trade in the description down below. The next thing to avoid is to stop trying to impress people that you don't care about. This is something that I will die on a hill for, but we live in a world, unfortunately, that rewards visible wealth. Just like how those pretentious peacocks show off their feather tails to attract a mate, most people use luxury cars or designer clothes and fancy jewelry to attract a mate. Studies show that nearly 40% of Americans overspend to impress others, but unlike peacocks and their damn feather tails, we can really screw ourselves by buying stuff on credit and getting into debt. But what's interesting is in the book, The Millionaire Next Door, where the author basically researched into the profiles of millionaires, most of the millionaires that the author surveyed said that they drove secondhand cars, they shopped at Walmart, and they dressed and looked like normal people. Meaning most wealthy people aren't out there showing off their money every chance they get. Do some wealthy people show it off? 100%, but there are plenty more people who don't. If you're a numbers person, that means that you are statistically better off prioritizing saving and investing to actually become wealthy rather than just trying to signal your wealth. So how do you shift your priorities when society wants you to keep buying the latest and greatest stuff? The best way is to just reframe what wealth means to you. So instead of splurging on the newest iPhone, splurge on invisible spending. In the book, The Psychology of Money, the author says that wealth is what you don't see, right? It's a saving, it's the investments, the financial security, the peace of mind. And what you see, in other words, what people show you, is called visible spending, and it's not actual wealth. I always say to focus on invisible spending first, like stocks, crypto, and real estate. All that stuff is gonna make you more money, and then once you have that money, you can use it to buy whatever the heck you want, right? That's the entire point of building wealth and achieving financial freedom. But before you've actually achieved it, you can't live lavishly and build wealth at the same time. The next thing to avoid if you wanna be rich is a little bit tricky because the world ain't fair, but you need to stop feeling powerless. Without going too deep into it in this video, the truth is some people have a much harder time building wealth than others. Whether that's because of decades of unfair policies, redlining, unequal access to credit, growing up poor, or countless other reasons. But to be clear, just because, right, the world isn't fair doesn't mean you should just throw your hands up in the air and give up. It means that you need to find a way around it because at the end of the day, no one else is as invested in your success as you are. So if you're watching right now and you're like, damn, the odds are stacked against me, what can I do to overcome these obstacles? Well, a great exercise that helped me is to create two lists. On the left side, I listed out the external factors that I believe were holding me back financially. Let's just say the rent is too damn high in New York City, or I have no family networking connections, or I live in an area with no opportunities whatsoever. You want to write all these things down. Then on the right side, list out all the actions that you can take to improve or get around your situation, even if it's a tiny bit, right? Like, let's say get a roommate to split the rent, attend one networking event a week, or learn a high-paying remote skill. Just make sure that the right columns has at least double the items on the left side. This list forces you to do two things, right? Number one, it validates that yes, you are not imagining all the challenges you're facing. Those are very real obstacles, but it also makes clear that you are not powerless. Focus your energy on crossing out each of those items on the right column one by one. And sometimes acknowledging all these external issues can actually be motivating. Like, wow, I am one unlucky dude. If I manage to overcome all this, then that is an epic story in the making. Which brings me to something you've got to start accepting. If you want to actually build wealth instead of just daydreaming about it, you need a plan. Like, you wouldn't start a road trip by just randomly driving around and hope you reach your destination. The same thing applies with your finances. So check out this video next where I break down exactly what you need to do in the next 6.5 months to build real wealth.